The moment I had my first team member, everything changed. I had way more time, I had way more focus and clarity on what I had to do, because the things I wasn't good at, I was able to outsource and get someone else to help me with that task. Now, hiring team members, there's a lot of do's and don'ts, and I've learned this the hard way by making the mistakes myself. If you're going to hire somebody, first of all, try to do it yourself firstly. Don't hire for a task that you haven't yet done yourself. Because if they do good or bad, you won't know unless you have a good indicator of what good looks like in that task. So it's a good idea to, even if you don't do the task 100% yourself, to at least attempt it to understand the intricacies of that task. Because when you do then outsource it to somebody else, you have a good indication if that person is good or not. If you have never done the task yourself, you will have no clue if they're doing a good job or a bad job. So always I would recommend, firstly, give it a go yourself, right? Try it, understand again what good and bad looks like in that role and task. And if you really can't figure it out, if you think therefore it makes more sense to get an expert on board for that specific task, then go ahead and hire somebody. And if they're able to explain to you more about that task and that role than you would ever understand from YouTube videos, that is a great person to take on board. When it comes to paid advertising, right, you have to run ads on, let's say Meta or Google or LinkedIn, whichever platform you choose. Now, I tried running advertisements myself on the Meta backend, right, Facebook Ads Manager. And I understood how to do it, but I knew that I wasn't the expert. And so instead of hiring somebody, a mentor, paying thousands of pounds to go through a course of his and, not really get that one-to-one hands-on help, but I personally find it a much smarter use of my time to hire somebody who's really good at the job and get him to do the job in the company. But whilst he's doing the job in the company, obviously a much better job than I would do as I have no skill set in that particular role, I will also get him to explain to me what he's doing as he's doing it. So it comes as like killing two birds with one stone, because not only do you have somebody in the company who's killing it in that specific role, but you also have the ability to learn from that person as they're doing it. So that's probably a really important aspect. And so I always do that with pretty much all my tasks, which is like, I want the person I'm hiring to A, do the job, but also if they're really good at it, now that they're working with me full time, I might as well spend an hour with them a day just learning about it, right? And even if I never do the job, that's absolutely fine, but at least I've learned something through this person. So if you get getting somebody on board, right, try to figure out a way that they can do the work and teach you about the work at the same time, so you grow, especially as a founder, right? And you understand these different roles and tasks. Because at some point, you're probably gonna have to hire a second person for that role, right? You need to hire 2 media buyers, for instance. And so then when you hire the second person, you've understood more about the role. So then when you go to hire that second person, you'll be able to have a better indicator if they're good or not. Another aspect of hiring somebody is always believe their red flags the first time, okay? And I've made this mistake, I wouldn't say a lot. I made this mistake once really badly with a client success manager who I thought on paper had everything going for them. They had really good skill sets, really good communication, and were really good with clients. Now, the one thing they didn't have going for them was that they were rude to me, right? They were disrespectful of my time, of my presence, of my authority as the founder, having to juggle multiple hats and doing some things. And so I took the disrespect the first time because I thought, you know what, they're good at their role, they should be fine. And when I say disrespect, they were just late to our one-to-one meeting, right? And I'm thinking to myself, you know what, it's okay, right? Because it's like, they're new to the company, getting used to things, they're still good at their job, it's fine. But this is where it snowballs. If somebody shows you a red flag, and when I say red flag, you need to have core competencies and traits and values that you want your team members to have, right? And if showing up to their one-to-one meeting with you as the founder is one of those, which now it is for me, and if they break that, then it will spiral. They will think, okay, fine, I can do this again and again and again. And so if someone shows the red flag the first time, believe it. And so when this person showed me the red flag, that disrespect just continued to snowball. And so you need to go ahead and say, okay, fine. Once someone shows you who they are, they will not change. And I've realized this, okay? And so the personality doesn't change. They will continue to be as they are, right? And potentially even progressively get worse, right? That is just the baseline they've showed you. And so when it comes to hiring, I've realized it's not about skill set anymore. It's not about, how good you are at your job. The number one thing is I always go for cultural fit, because there's so many people who can do this job, right? There's so many people out there who are skilled, who have amazing expertise, but the number one thing is the soft skills, right? And your personality. Your personality, trust, and your soft skills and your values and morals, those things come first, because skills can always be taught, right? So when I'm hiring a team now, I always ask questions outside of their skill set. Like, How are you with your family? How many siblings do you have? What do you do outside your free time? Like, getting to know them as a person and understanding what their morals are, what their values are, what their thoughts on trust, and all these sort of soft personality skills is going to be more important for you in the long run, because you can always teach them the skills. But if they're fundamentally lacking in some of the core aspects of a team member that you want, then that will never change. They will always be like that, because it's hard to change someone's personality compared to being able to teach them like a skill set. So don't try to go for the skill sets, right? Yes, they need to be good at their job for sure, but if you're choosing between different people and one's slightly better at the job but is a terrible person, and one's slightly worse at the job but obviously, hits the check mark when it comes to their personality and their values, and they're hungry to learn, always go for that option. It's always better. It will, trust me, I can't even explain it to you, but that is always the better option every single time. I think it's your job as a founder, it's more important for you to hire people who are better in the role than you, right? Honestly, I feel like sometimes the dumbest person in my company, and I should feel like that. I have one core competency, which is like revenue generation, partnerships, sales, marketing, and so that is the parts that I do. Everything else, I find an expert, because I could do everything myself, but then I become the bottleneck. Everything that I know and my knowledge and my experience becomes the bottleneck of the company. But the bottleneck of the company should not be me. It should be the combined joint knowledge and experience of everybody in the company, right? So then the company, so it's like, okay, if this is me, right? And then I'm a mountain, then the peak is quite short, right? If these are sides of the mountain, the peak is very short. Now, if I have two people, right, then the mountain becomes bigger and the peak is higher. And then you have three people, again, the mountain becomes even bigger and the peak is higher. And so this mountain is the company. And the more people you have, the more joint expertise and knowledge, then the peak and the size of the mountain, and essentially the very top of the mountain, becomes higher, higher, and higher. And so it is important to know that, okay, you are not alone. It's your team's effort and joint collaboration that leads to a successful company. And this is obviously what I've learned from Hamosi. And so do not think that you have to do everything, that you have to be the best at everything in your company. You need to find people who are better than you at things that you're not good at, and allow them to bring magic into the company. And so it is so important that you do not feel like you need to know everything. And I think Richard Branson's a very good example of that. He's built a multi-billion dollar enterprise, right? Many different companies. And when he starts a new company, he doesn't know everything about the aviation industry, for instance. He will find an expert in the aviation industry and partner with them so that that person can bring their skill sets, knowledge, and experience and industry connections to him, and he can implement his resources and the capital and whatever business knowledge and acumen he does have to make that a successful company, right? If it's starting Virgin Airlines, for instance. And so I think it's really important to understand that you as a founder should not be the best at everything. You should be the best at finding good people who are good at that very specific role, and in aggregate, being able to build a company that the peak is much higher than you individually.